So what I have here is a quarter scale 3D printed model of a record player that I have made to function digitally by using WAV files and a Teensy4 microcontroller and audio shield. And I have these little 3D printed records here that I can place on top. So it sort of functions like a MP3 player, but in this little record player look to it. And this was pretty complicated to figure out how to get everything to fit and test to make sure that the logic would work how I want it to, identifying each record, making sure all of the button functions worked. So I'm going to step back a little and explain how I got here. Alright, so here in Onshape, a browser-based CAD platform that I like to use, I have my record player model here, and I wanted to make sure when I was planning this project, I wanted to make sure that I represented as many components as possible. So this model you see here represents exactly what I printed, which would be this turntable top here, the base, and as well as these front and inside button panel components. And as you can see here, I have, like on this turntable piece, I have the potentiometer represented. And the reason I was able to get the sizing of this was my digital calipers that I used. I used that to size and create parts for pretty much everything in here. I was able to get some close measurements with my calipers and then represent them with a 3D model. At the bottom here you can see I have all of these different tabs, and then they all got inserted into this assembly here. So to get a better view of the inside, I'll hide the turntable top there. Looking at a top-down view here, you can see I have this breadboard on the inside here, and I have the audio shield and Teensy4 microcontroller, and I also have this here is a audio amp to act as an amplifier for these two little speakers right here. I also have a on and off toggle switch here, and then this is a micro USB to 5 volts to get power to everything in the box here. And on the front you can see the front part of this base, I had little holes extruded out into the front here to act as a little speaker grill to mimic the original model, the original record player that is. And then this front button panel piece here have little indentions to show the functions of the buttons, and then holes to pass through the front of the base to be able to attach it and to have the buttons pass through. And on this back piece here, I have holes to put the little legs of the buttons so that I could solder the backs of these and the wires would get back to the breadboard here. And then I have little notches coming out of the base of the record player to hold the little speakers in. And for the breadboard and the micro USB to be held in here, I have little hexagonal insert slots, I guess you could call them, so that I can put my hex standoff threaded inserts into there and then hold them down inside the case. I wanted to keep stuff from moving and rattling around if possible. Overall, I like the way that it turned out. The only thing I really regret was the way I did these little pins here to hold on the turntable piece. I had an incident where when I first was putting this on to test its fit, instead of all four of them coming loose and lifting straight off, I sort of did it at an angle and ended up snapping a couple of these because of the way that it came off, which was unfortunate, but enough of it was left that it will still fit on there and not slide off. So it's a little loose, but it does the job, and I wasn't about to reprint the entire base to solve that problem. One other thing I'll show is the records themselves. I printed these out of black PLA and have these concentric circles coming up from the center there, and they're all extruded just a little bit to give the appearance of the grooves on our record. And I wanted to sort of force that pattern in there, and that last layer the printer did would have zigzagged back and forth and wouldn't have the nice concentric groove look that it does now. I'll go inside the sketch here and show you this little arrow to use to indicate each record. I sort of used the transform command, and each time I needed to send an STL to my slicer software for my 3D printer, I would just rotate it a certain amount, and I calculated at what positions they would need to be to line up with the range of the potentiometer, and what values, analog values, I wanted to correspond that with. So that's how I did that. So here's my test setup that I've been working with. I have a Teensy 4.0 microcontroller and the audio shield that you can buy for it, which takes a micro SD card to hold the WAV files. And I also have a little on and off switch to cut power, the 5 volts to the whole system. I have a board from Adafruit to drive these small speakers so I can have left and right audio channels. And then I have 5 buttons here: play, pause, previous, next, volume down and up. And then I have a potentiometer here that lets me select, through its range, I can select different albums. And once it identifies an album, I can play, pause, previous, next through those tracks, and it won't let me go to a different album until I turn the potentiometer dial. So if I power up my little benchtop power supply here, flip the switch, if I press play, pause twice, I have it selected to play Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. So it starts off with the first track on that album, and then I can hit next. Sometimes I've found I've had to hit it 2 times to make it work, but play, pause works. Volume down. If you do it enough, it just mutes it. And then if I turn the dial and hit next, I get another album. And the functions all work for that. So the goal is, once I've thoroughly tested this and have all of the files ready to go, is dump all the guts in here. So I've 3D printed this case here to resemble a actual model of record player, sort of a combo CD player as well. But all this will do is play my little fake records that I'll put on the top and turn with the potentiometer. And I'll have my little buttons going through the front there. And on this front piece, I have little indentions to show the functions of the buttons as well. And this will hold the potentiometer. See, I've got a little notch in there to keep it from rotating. So once that's all together, with all of my little nylon fasteners, non-conductive fasteners, and I make sure that all fits, I will prime and paint the case to make it look like the real thing. So here I have assembled and tested my record player, and it's pretty much done except for priming and painting it. I was going to make a lid, but it would have to be kind of tall to clear the spindle, and the proportion would look kind of off versus the real model. So I'm going to omit the lid for now. You may notice I have 3D printed records here to use with this player with black PLA, and each of these has an arrow on it, and it's in a different position relative to the flat end of the hole, which is sort of a D shaft pattern, so that it can only go onto the spindle one way. So you may notice this one's all the way at the bottom, and then they sort of work their way counterclockwise. So as I put them on and turn this spindle, it'll line up with with the front of the record player to give a certain analog value, and that's how I'm identifying what records are being played. So if we take a look inside here, as I showed in the previous clip, the potentiometer is fitting through the top of the lid here, and I've sort of friction fit the spindle piece onto that. Just printed it with a tight tolerance and just shoved it on there. And then in the back here, we have my on and off switch and a micro USB jack that I'm getting my 5 volts for to power the system, and sort of crudely soldered there, but it does the job. And then I was able to solder these jumper wires, clipped off the end, and soldered them to my board. But I wanted to use jumper wires like this because I wanted a lot of these parts to be serviceable if I needed to take the case apart for whatever reason. I didn't want to have to like unsolder anything to do that. So that's the rationale behind a lot of that. I'll try and turn this around here. The messiest part was this front button panel for sure. So I had 5 I guess signal wires going back to the TNC, and then I had to bring one ground wire back, and then I had to make little jumper wires for the grounds, and that was a mess. For the speakers, I have little pieces made into the case to keep them in place. And I can put them in and take them out pretty easily if I want to. All in all, I like the way it came together. I don't really have, one thing I wish I would have thought of, I don't really have a status light to tell if it's on or not. Right now, since it's just unpainted white plastic, you can kind of see the light shine through when it first flashes on. But that's the only way to know if it's on, and that might not even be visible after I paint it. But I'll go ahead and put a record on here and show you how this works. So it'll sit on the, there's no platter like a real record player. It just kind of flops over the top of the spindle there. And it's a little loose, but there's enough tolerance between the analog values that it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'll point that down right there. Press play twice. Dancing Queen by ABBA, and other lovely such songs are included on that record. Goodbye, lamp. So I will prime this, paint this, and see what it turns out like. I'm kind of skeptical that the acrylic paint I have will look right. Trying to match a color of a wood and painting a plastic case seems like it might not look right, but we'll see how that turns out. And I really don't think it turned out too bad. I'll put a side-by-side comparison on screen, but I really don't think it looks that far off, at least the faux wood color. I'm gonna go with this, and in a bit here I'll put on screen all of the components ready to assemble into the case, and then I'll put it together and see what we got. Alright, this is everything, and I'm ready to put everything back together. Hopefully adding the paint didn't make the fit too tight for anything. The only thing I am slightly worried about is the buttons fitting back through the front of this plate right here. They feel a little tight, so I might get my handy dandy little round file here to help that process along and get those to fit in a bit better. But other than that, I'll get this going. One other thing I'll mention, I did end up adding some black marker inside the little speaker grill pieces to make it look a little bit more like the original. But other than that, I think I'm ready to fit this all back together. So first, I'll put these inserts back in the bottom. Then I'll put the micro USB adapter back in and tighten those down. Then I can slide in my toggle switch. Plug it up to the 5 volts and ground to the adapter there. Once the board is inserted into the case, I can slide the buttons into the front like so. Now that the breadboard's fastened down, before anything else gets in my way, I will fasten this front and button panel on there using my little nylon screws. With those on, I can put my teensy board back in there, hook up the wires for the audio amp, and then slide the speakers in there, hook up my potentiometer, slide that in the top, and then we're good. Now here we are. I have everything assembled and ready to go. I have micro USB power plugged in, and I'll just flip it on, pop a record on the top, face that forward,
I may be climbing on rainbows, but baby, here goes. Dream.
and there you have it. I'm pretty satisfied with how this turned out. You may notice there's a little bit of paint missing on that. It's because one of my records had a slightly tighter tolerance on it. It's hard to get off, so I'll have to sand that one down later. But all in all, I think it looks pretty good. I think it's definitely the most complicated thing I've ever come up with and designed and assembled on my own. And I'm looking forward to some other hobby electronics type projects in the future. So stay tuned for more on my blog and my YouTube channel. I actually have a blog page going up for a little more information about this project if you'd like to read through that. Thank you.